Today I want to talk about the murder victim Anton. And this was from Lyons, Nebraska in December 15th, I believe, 1986. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because it's a fascinating case in which a police chief was ultimately convicted of her murder. And he is currently alive and out of jail, which boggles my mind, and we'll get into that. But so Anton was a white female. She was in her early 30s, I want to say 34 years old, and she had moved to this small Nebraska town called Lyons in October of 1986. There's only a couple pictures that I've seen of her. She looked relatively attractive, but she had been in a car accident about 10 years previous to moving to Lyons, where she had scarred her face. So she wore a lot of heavy makeup and she walked with a limp. She needed a cane. She dragged her foot. Now, because of this victimology, there's a little bit more to her. She was a very complicated person, meaning almost a Jekyll and Hyde personality. So when she moved to Lyon, is it Lyon or Lyons? It's Lyons, Nebraska. She became involved with the church. And she would go to church and say that she didn't drink, didn't smoke, was a religious person. Now, whether you don't drink or don't, I don't know what that has to do with religion. I'm a religious person. Now, I don't drink or smoke either, but if I wanted to, I would. It would not make me unreligious. But people, correlate the two. But there was another side of Anna where I guess she was a barfly. And she would frequent bars. She would get really drunk. She would throw herself onto people, to men. And so I like to drill down into her victimology and find out why that was. Now, she was raised by her grandparents, and that threw off a red flag to me automatically, because typically when that happens, there's a problem, right? Whether the parents are not ready to settle down, whether they're split parents, whatever it is, there's usually an issue there. So that was the first red flag. She's in this car accident. I would like to know what her behavior was before the car accident that did this damage to her physically. She had dropped out of school from what I read, but then she was able to maybe get her GED and then go on to a community college, and I'm not sure whether she finished that or not. So knowing more about her pre-accident would have been good to solve this case. Listen, the case is solved, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But just because of my natural curiosity, I would like to know those things about her. So she moves to Lyons, Nebraska. She ends up meeting this guy named Greg Webb at a bar. Now, Greg Webb is a police chief. Now, automatically, there's some sort of reverence to that connotation, meaning you're a police chief. Well, when you look at Lyons, Nebraska, and realize that it was a two-man department, and he was the police chief of a two-man department, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to meet the greatest level of accolades or have your resume being that great in order to accomplish that feat. I read that he was there for, I believe, 15 years as the police chief. And for a lot of those years, he was the only law enforcement. He didn't even have anyone working under him. It was just him. So temper expectations when you hear that he was a police chief. Now, I'm sure Anna didn't ask those questions. Well, how many people work under you? You know, what's your resume look like? It was, hey, this is Greg Webb. He is police chief of Lyons. She probably liked that as a single, female who is drinking. And listen, no matter what anyone wants to say, everyone knows deep down when you're out drinking and having a good time and you're single, for females, a lot of times you are not looking for a one night stand. You are looking for somebody. Where else do you go to meet them? When I was single, that was always the thing. Where do you go to meet women? This was pre-internet, obviously, before Tinder and all these other dating apps. You didn't have that. So you would go to a bar. And it seemed like whether you drank or not, you go to the bar. Once you found the person that you were looking for and started dating, you didn't go to the bar anymore. At least some people. So Anna ends up meeting Police Chief Greg Webb. He lives in what's called the Pink House, because I guess it was pink at one point in time. And it was turned into a duplex. And he lived upstairs. He suggested that Anna move downstairs. And, there was currently unoccupied, so on and so forth. And she did. She moved downstairs. He lived upstairs. And, of course, they began a relationship. I'll put relationship in quotes, because it doesn't appear that he took things very serious, but it appears that maybe she did. And that happens. I see that a lot. And the girl becomes more attached than the guy does. In this case, Greg had another girlfriend. And according to a friend of Anna's, she would be downstairs sleeping and she would hear Greg and this other girl having sex. And it would drive her crazy. So much so that she sprinkled holy water going up the steps to Greg's apartment. Now, right there, we can stop and say, this girl has an issue. I'm going to tell you right now, regardless of whether she has religion, regardless of if she has a drinking problem, there is an issue mentally with this girl. So, now, let me preface that by saying I never want to talk bad about victims. They have family members out there. Okay? But I also am a proponent of truth. And I try not to hurt people's feelings. That's why I usually never give a last name of a suspect, unless it's already out there. I just don't believe in hurting them or their family. I certainly don't want to hurt Anton's friends or family by saying she's a bad person. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying she has some sort of mental issue. Maybe that mental issue only comes out when she's drinking. I don't know. But to sprinkle holy water when you're not really religious, and because he's having sex with somebody else, when he feels that they're not in a relationship, but you feel that they are, I mean, there's an issue there. Now, again, I go back to being a police chief. Listen, it doesn't matter if you're a police chief, you're a professional football player, you're president of the United States. Anybody is capable of murder. All you need is a bad day and a good reason. And you can be on death row. That's basically what it comes down to. bad day and a good reason. So, am I surprised that Greg Webb, this police chief of this small town, was convicted? He pled guilty. Was arrested for this? No, not at all. So let's get to Greg Webb, and him being the police chief. Let's look into his background a little bit. What is he like? Well, he's a heavy drinker also. So right there shows another red flag to me. When you have two heavy drinkers, listen, let me tell you the most honest thing I'll ever tell you on this channel. Me personally, and I don't like to talk about my past experiences that much, but I do, because that's how you connect with them and understand things. Every bad decision I ever made in my life, I was under the influence of alcohol. And I am betting there are millions of people out there, hundreds of thousands that will watch this video, that can say the same thing. And that's why I don't drink anymore. And I haven't drank for a long time. I will if I want to, but to me, it's just bad. It's bad mojo. Bad things happen. Bad decisions. Here, Greg Webb and Anton drank too much. And something happened. Now, Anton goes missing. I believe, again, it was December 15th, 1986. Her friend, who lived across the street, couldn't get in contact with her. So she went upstairs to Greg Webb and said, "Hey, I can't find Anna. Can you help me?" So here you have the person who committed the crime coming down, letting himself into the apartment because he had a key, showing this girl around and saying, "Hey, I don't know where she is." And all the time he had killed her. He took a phone address book. Remember, this is pre-cell phones. We actually had to write down people's phone numbers. The friend said, "I'm going to start calling these people." And he said, let me take care of that. And he says that he called these people. I doubt that he did. And relayed back to the friend, "Hey, I've contacted these people and no one's seen her." At some point in the following days, there is a meeting with like the state police investigators, police chief of neighboring town, things like that, where Greg Webb was included. And one of the investigators asked him whether he had any sexual relationships with her. Now, I would like to know what led into that. Meaning, you have to already suspect him or something in her background that would lead you to ask that question to that police chief while you're sitting at a round table. Because you didn't ask everybody that. You asked him particular. Now, yes, he lives above her. But why ask him that? What came up in your background investigation with either one of those that made the investigator answer that question or ask that question? And he said he had not. And then a few minutes later, he said, "Yeah, I did." So he lied initially. So there's a red flag. Then he answers he did. Allegedly, the police officers in this group asked him to leave the round table, the conversation. Because right there, according to investigators, he became a suspect. There has to be more than that. He can't become a suspect just based off of that one lie for however many minutes until he clarified. Maybe so. But I would think there's something else there. Police end up getting a search warrant for his apartment. At first, they obviously search her apartment downstairs. And he is upstairs and he is walking around. They say that he's trying to listen to what they're saying. I don't know how they would know that unless, if I was, that was my case, I would have surveillance units outside of that apartment looking up into the windows of his apartment to see what he's doing while we're searching the victim's apartment. I don't know whether they did that or not, but they said they thought he was listening. He ends up leaving. He flees. And he withdraws his bank account and he flees the area. Now, that is called consciousness of guilt. You're a police chief with a steady income there and a steady job for 15 years, and then you're going to leave. Now, for me, that's when he becomes the number one suspect. Not before that. He's a person of interest. I'm curious, but now he's number one suspect. So they get a search warrant for his apartment. They find blood going up the stairs. They find blood in his house. They didn't have DNA back then, but they had blood typing. And all the blood typing in a mop, on the floor, on his coat, all matched Anna's blood type. More than likely it was hers, unless he was a serial killer or killed multiple people. Certainly today we would use DNA to verify it was Anna's blood. Anna's body is found, I think 12 days later, right after Christmas, December 27th, 1986, on an Indian reservation. Now, investigators believe he did that to throw off jurisdiction, and he says differently, and we'll get into what he says after he is taken into custody. But she was cleaned. Now, investigators say she was cleaned because he was a cop and he was getting rid of evidence. She was naked, and it appeared that she'd been shot 2 times and stabbed. Now, I'm trying to verify that because that's unusual. Not that it's never happened. I think of, well, I was going to say the yogurt shop murders, where 2 different caliber weapons were used, which led me to believe that more than likely there was 2 suspects. But we've come to find out there was only one. Here you have 2 different objects, weapons used. You have a gun. She was shot twice, and the locations of those shots are important. They're in her stomach. And she has stab wounds. Now, I've read articles, I don't have the police reports, newspaper articles where it stated she wasn't stabbed at all, that she just had the gunshot wounds to the stomach. I don't know the truth to that, and I'd like to know, because if she's just shot twice in the stomach, those aren't kill shots. That's not somebody shooting to kill somebody. That's to stop the threat, I believe. But if she has stab wounds now, on top of that, okay, now I want to look into this further as a domestic situation. Greg Webb flees to South America, I think, Belize. He runs out of money. He crosses back into the border, I think, into Mexico. Went to Arizona maybe for a little bit, and then went to Florida. I want to say Daytona Beach. And he gets a fake driver's license. He ends up getting a job with the construction. They show this on Unsolved Mysteries. A viewer recognizes him, and he's arrested. He comes back to stand trial, and he ends up pleading guilty to manslaughter. And his version of events are this. They were drinking heavily. Remember, all bad decisions happen when you're drinking. Secondly, he passed out. He woke up in the morning, and she was dead on his kitchen floor. He checked his revolver, and there were 2 shots missing. And that's it. Then he says, I got to get rid of her body. Did not say anything about bathing her, wiping her down, taking off her clothes, but he drove around. He was going to dump her in a certain location. He looked in the rearview mirror, so he had blood on his face. And then he decided, I'm going to go down this dirt road and dispose of her here in this reservation field. Investigators don't believe that. You know, they said that he had planned that all along. Now, the blood on the face, I want to know more about that. That intrigues me. Why? Because if you're shooting somebody in the stomach from a distance, you're not going to get that blood spatter on your face. After she's dead and she is on the floor and you wake up in the morning, her heart's not pumping out any more blood. Yet you clean her, you say, and you dump her body. You theorize that the other girl that you were having sex with was jealous and she came in and shot her using your weapon. Then how does blood spatter get on your face and on your neck as you claim? To me, that would lead credence to there being stab wounds and getting cast off or blood spatter, or you were in close proximity to Anna when you shot her. Again, if there was a struggle for the gun and your face was down low, yeah, maybe. But the blood spatter is very curious clue for me. It certainly does not lead to his theory of events that this other girl came in and killed her. Because what? You're going to be close enough to get blood spatter on you from this shot to her abdomen, and then you're just going to go to sleep? I don't care how much you're drinking. If that happens, you're not going to go right to sleep. And then what? The girl just leaves the gun there? He's full of shit. Okay? This is an easy case. You know what I mean? People always ask, how many cold cases have you solved? Listen, I've solved a few, okay? But they're very hard. If they don't have the evidence like this case does. These are easy cases. When I was a detective on the job, if I got cases like this all the time, I would have 500 solved cases because they're easy. But they become cold because you lack the evidence. You don't have the blood trail leading up to the suspect's apartment like you do here. So this was a very easy case to solve. And solve it was. So Greg Webb pleads guilty to manslaughter. I don't know why they agreed to that. I have no idea. Not the defense. Why the prosecution agreed to that. To me, they had enough evidence to go to trial and convict this man of murder. I can't see it even being anything other than first or second degree murder. Even third degree is better than manslaughter. So he pleads to manslaughter charge and he does his time and he's out. Living in Florida still. Unbelievable. It just shows how the justice system is not fair. It isn't. Listen, whether you like it or not, and whether I agree with it or not, I've arrested drug dealers in my lifetime. And I put them behind bars for longer periods of time than Greg Webb did. Is that fair? I don't think so. That's the justice system. It's absolutely insane. This guy should still be in jail. And he takes no responsibility for it still. Greg Webb, if you're out there and you're watching this, I would tell you this to your face. You should still be in jail. You did this. You know that you did this. There was no blacking out. You did this. And you need to take responsibility for it. I would love to hear your true versions of events. Remember, you can't be tried again. That's double jeopardy. Okay? But maybe to clear your conscience, to tell exactly what happened. I'm here. Get a hold of me. I have a website. You can get a hold of me easily. So, a couple of things that we can learn from this case. Number one, look into victimology. Find out as much about the victim as you can. I always say, go to their high school. Talk to the student body. You're going to talk to their friends, but talk to the people that aren't really their friends, but know them, associated with them. Talk to the teachers. You'll get a very good sense of who that person is. You'll get a better sense of who that person is if you do that versus talking to their family. That's a big mistake when investigators go and just talk to the family. You have to talk to the family. But they know one version of Anna, right? Think about your own life. Think about what your best friend knows about you that your parents do not know and you don't ever want them to know. Those are things investigators have to know. Yes, they want to know this part, but you have to know this part too. The good, the bad, the ugly. You have to know it in order to solve crime. So victimology, very important here. Following leads and evidence and what is most likely is paramount. And it was in this case. Okay, you have a police chief. It doesn't matter if he's a police chief or if he's a doctor or if he's a factory worker. If he's living up above her in a duplex, you have to obviously talk to him, get an alibi, what he was doing. Was there any romance between the two? And once they found out there was, okay, then possibly what do you have? She was not sexually assaulted. So if I'm on the scene and I'm looking at that, okay, she's not sexually assaulted. She's shot. I'm looking at what? Conflict. Because conflict is the very first thing that you want to look at. Where is the conflict, if any? Here you have conflict. Now, if she had gotten into a verbal altercation or a fight with Greg Webb's other girlfriend at any point in time, she's a suspect. She's a person of interest because of what? Conflict. But she also has conflict with Greg. There's no sexual assault because why? He doesn't have to sexually assault her. He's having consensual sex with the victim. So that's the first thing that you should think about when you see the body and after the autopsy. Well, she wasn't sexually assaulted. Okay, so we're looking at a different type of killer. We're looking for conflict. In a lot of cases, that's not true. Like Tess Hilt, Delphi murders, where sexual assault is the motive. There's no conflict. The body tells you that, and what was done to the body, how the body is, how it became, in a sense, deceased. What weapons were used? A gun? Okay. A knife? Okay. All those, they tell you a story. No sexual assault and a gun. Okay, we're not looking for this type of suspect, this type of offender, sexual predator. Okay, we're looking for conflict. And here, police were able to easily track the blood up, conflict, Greg Webb. Easy peasy. I'd love to have cases like this. But instead, I get something like Brenda Condon, where she just disappears and there is no evidence on the surface. But if you look deep enough and you notice a couple dollar bills on the bar, one glass, the receipts are put away, then you can deduce who murdered Brenda Condon. So it's just about deducing, pulling apart, knowing what to look at. Sometimes it's very hard for me to explain my thought process and how and what I do to look for an offender. But I try very hard because I want to educate other law enforcement and amateur detectives, so that way we don't make mistakes and start, publicly accusing people when they had nothing to do with it. I think that's one of the worst tragedies in true crime. So I always get the question, how do you become a cold case detective? Ken Mains, how did you become a cold case detective? Well, I had that in mind a long time ago, over 10 years ago. And I got the answer right here. Mastering Cold Case Investigations, a guidebook for detectives. I wrote this 550-page behemoth for that purpose. Because when I was in high school, when I was in college, and then when I became a detective, I wanted to know more about cold cases, why they go cold, why are they unsolved, is it evidence, is it lack of determination, is it perseverance, is it politics, all the above. Well, I set the answer to all those questions in my new book. It's been 10 years of research, writing, jotting down things. I knew that I was going to write this book eventually, and it finally has come to a head where I'm able to actually get it done, get it published by Unsolved No More Publishing, and get it out to you. So who's this book for? It's for detectives. It's for amateur detectives. It's for college students, academia, forensics. The topics I cover in this book, from what is a cold case, victimology, research, crime scene location, criminal profiling, conflict, greed, sex and revenge, possibilities versus probabilities. That is huge in this book. I go through that a lot because that's the basis and foundation of my methodology. Evidence, sketches. Of course, you have affirmations. Why should you listen? Social media, the rule of psychology, equivocal deaths, modus operandi, signature, legal and ethical considerations in cold cases, integrity, involving as a cold case detective, serial killers, missing persons, domestic violence, exposing myths, premeditation versus spontaneous, confidential informants, wrongly convicted, clandestine graves, you name it. I cover it in here. 550-page hardcover textbook. And along with all those topics, I also wanted to do case studies, especially case studies on confessions. Why? Because you can learn so much from confessions. At the end of the book, I go in great detail about killers in general who have confessed, why they did it, and what we can learn. That's always the most important thing, what we can learn from them and move forward and apply what we learned on that case to a future case. So I have all that. I tried to incorporate as much as I could, and there's a lot in there about real life cases that I have worked on and I have either solved or learned something from. And I'll tie that to a specific chapter, along with tips, certain things that I think you should look for in certain areas. It's a great book to learn from. But it's not just for active law enforcement members, private investigators, defense attorneys. Everybody can learn from this book. And that is what is motivated me to write this, is I want people to learn. I am tired of seeing wrongfully convicted people I'm tired of the politics of district attorneys' offices and state police and local jurisdictions who either don't have the resources to do it or they just pass it off because they don't know how, they don't want to, they don't have the desire, the determination, and all that does is affect the victims and the victims' families. And I see it time and time again. You will see endorsements and affirmations from victims' family members in here who I've worked with in the past because they are the most important people. To pass off what I have learned to you so you can be a great investigator, you can be a great detective, and you can solve cases just like I do. Get your copy now. I'll sign it. I'll get it out to you and start learning. That way we can start solving cool cases together. Interesting case. If you want, I think they showed this on 1989 Unsolved Mysteries. Um, and I think it was on America's Most Wanted as well. Let's see if there's anything else in my notes that I want to get through. The luminol testing was done in Anna Anton's apartment along with Greg's, and there was blood found in both. So I'm assuming, and I didn't read this anywhere, but how does that happen? Well, first of all, you have to find out where is the most blood at. If it's down in her apartment, then you can assume maybe that she was drug up the steps and for Greg to clean her and then dispose of her. That seems counterintuitive to me. If they were in his apartment, wherever she was killed is going to be the larger amount of blood. I'm assuming it was in his apartment. And the blood trail going down was probably him, I'm guessing, going back and forth to the apartments because he was seen taking the body. They said it was a large object, putting it into the trunk of his car. So it was her. But she's wrapped up. She's in something. She's been dead for a while. He cleaned her. I wouldn't expect that to be blood trailed from his apartment down the steps. You know, she's wrapped up, heart's not pumping. He cleaned her. So what was that blood trail from? My guess is from him going back and forth to where her body is, to where her apartment is, getting rid of evidence, and so on and so forth. I don't know how much blood. That would tell you a lot. If it's smeared, you know, you could, and if it was quite a bit, then yes, you could say he's either dragging her up, dragging her down those steps. If it's blood drops with tails on it, it could possibly be from a knife. It isn't going to be from a gun, right? Unless he pistol whipped her, but there was no evidence of that. I'd be looking for a knife in one of the apartments if that was the case, or he cut himself, but there was no indication of that. A warrant was issued for first-degree murder for him December 30th, 1986. So she went missing the 15th. So within 15 days, they had this figured out. He lived in Florida for 7 years before he was arrested. He pled no contest to manslaughter and tampering with evidence. I'm assuming the tampering with evidence has to do with her body, but I'm not sure. He did say that he threw the pistol, the revolver, into a body of water. I don't remember where. Maybe that has to do with the tampering of evidence as well. But You see what I mean? He's going through the phase after the murder. So the post-offense phase where he's getting rid of evidence, the body, the gun. Why? If you didn't do this, and you say that you didn't, I mean, who's going to believe you? You know what I mean? You wake up in the morning from heavy drinking and you see this girl dead. You don't call the state police? Yeah, you're the chief of police. You don't make a call and say, hey, something's terribly wrong here. I know I didn't do anything. But instead, you get rid of your gun. You do all these things. There's only one reason. It's because you're guilty. You minimize some things. But I've never seen a case where there's just no doubt. And there was another chief of police I saw that was interviewed. He must have worked for the neighboring town, or maybe he was the chief of police of Lyons before this guy. He says, well, I have my doubts that it was Greg Webb. You have your doubts? Buddy, you shouldn't even be a cop then, let alone a chief of police. If you have your doubts, you should never investigate a homicide or a cold case ever. And anyone that you did investigate should be reinvestigated. To me, maybe you're friends with him. I'm hoping that's the case. Because then you have some legitimate bias. Where if you're not friends with him and you say that, that's incompetence. And on the job, I can deal with one. I can't deal with the other. My thoughts on that. Webb repeatedly denied killing her, claiming accidental circumstances that he disposed of the body out of fear of being blamed, blah, blah, blah. He's told reporters that he fled, or that he agreed to a plea deal to avoid the risk at trial. Yeah, well, no shit. Who wouldn't do that? You're going to be found guilty because you did it. I don't blame the defense. I blame the prosecution for making that offer of manslaughter. It's horrible. That is another reason I wanted to talk about this, is because to me, the prosecution, unless there's something in there that I don't know about, to me, the prosecution is being lazy. Now, listen, I worked as a detective for the district attorney's office in particular for 8 years. And I know that there are some lazy attorneys, especially assistant district attorneys. Usually a district attorney isn't, but at least in my case, I know he wasn't. But there were some ADAs that were, and they pled everything out because they didn't want to go to trial. I hope that that wasn't the case in something as important as murder and getting justice for Anton. I hope that there's something exculpatory evidence or something that they were afraid of taking the chance at trial. Because if not, it's a travesty of justice that Greg Webb did 8 years or 6 years, whatever it was, and is a free man for taking this girl's life. Come on, DA's offices. You got to do better. You have to do better. It makes me sick. And I don't think Anton has any family left. But before they died, I am sure that they were sick as well. He should have gotten life in prison. That's what I think about the Anton case and the guilty party, ex-police chief Greg Webb from Lyons, Nebraska, December 15th, 1986. I hope you took something from this. Again, it's to get the word out there, but it's also to educate, and that is a big reason why I do these videos, is I have knowledge and I would like to pass it on to other people who are willing to listen. So, for those that are listening, thank you. Mains out.